I went to check my mail on a Tuesday morning and found it cemented shut. That was the day I stopped trying to be reasonable. My name is Maria. I'm 34 years old. I work as a full-time nanny for 2 kids in a neighborhood about 20 minutes from where I live. I rent a small single-story house in a suburb of Phoenix. It's not a fancy place. Stucco walls, a concrete driveway, a lawn that's mostly gravel because of the heat. I've been there 3 years. It was quiet when I moved in. That changed when the Hendersons bought the place next door. Before the mailbox, there were other things. Small things. But I want to tell this straight from the start, so you understand how it got to that point. I moved in during the spring of 2021. The house next door was empty for 6 months. Then Brad and Tiffany Henderson moved in with their 3 kids and 2 large dogs. They had a white pickup truck and a black SUV. The first week, Brad parked the pickup in my driveway, just pulled right in. I was coming home from work and had to park on the street. I knocked on their door. Brad answered. He was wearing a tank top and holding a beer, even though it was 4 in the afternoon. I told him that was my driveway. He said, "Oh, I thought that was community parking." I told him it wasn't. He laughed and said, no problem," and moved the truck. I thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, the truck was in my driveway again. This time it stayed there overnight. In the morning, I left a note on the windshield. It said, "Please don't park here. I need access to my garage." When I got home from work, the note was crumpled on my doorstep. The truck was gone, but they had started parking their SUV, so it blocked the sidewalk in front of my house. That's a fine in our neighborhood. The HOA sends warnings. I didn't call the HOA. I talked to Tiffany instead. She was outside watering their gravel lawn. I walked over and said, "Hi, I'm Maria from next door. Could you guys keep the sidewalk clear? The HOA has rules about it." Tiffany turned off the hose. She was wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. She said, "We have 3 kids. We have a lot of stuff to unload. The sidewalk is public property anyway." I said, "Actually, we're responsible for the sections in front of our houses." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll tell Brad." They moved the SUV 6 inches. Just enough that technically it wasn't blocking the sidewalk, but you had to walk around it into the street. Then came the dogs. The Hendersons had 2 pit bulls. Nice enough dogs, but big. They would let them out into their backyard, which was fine, except their backyard had a gate that opened onto my driveway. The dogs started pooping on my side of the driveway. Not near their gate, near my garage door. Every morning there would be 2 or 3 piles right where I had to walk to get to my car. I bought a bag of dog treats and gave them to the dogs when they were outside. I thought if the dogs liked me, maybe the Hendersons would be nicer. That was a mistake. The dogs started jumping on my fence. They started barking whenever I went outside. Brad yelled at me from his yard. He said, "Stop feeding my dogs. You're making them soft." I stopped feeding the dogs. The poop continued. Then they started using my trash bins. My trash day is Wednesday. Theirs is Thursday. On Tuesday nights, I would put my bins out by the curb. By morning, they would be overflowing. Coffee grounds, pizza boxes, diapers. The lid wouldn't close. The trash truck started leaving my bins full because they wouldn't take bins with the lid open. I had to start putting my bins out at 5 in the morning, right when the truck came, so they couldn't fill them up overnight. I started to feel like I was being pushed out of my own house, just slowly, an inch at a time. But I kept things civil. I said good morning when I saw them. I waved. I kept the peace, because I'm tired. I work 50 hours a week watching other people's children. I come home tired. The last thing I want is a war with my neighbors. I thought if I just stayed quiet, they would get bored and stop. That was wrong. In October, things got worse. I started working from home 3 days a week. The family I nanny for had a new baby, and the parents wanted me to do light housekeeping while the baby slept. That meant I was home more during the day. I started to see what the Hendersons were really doing. They were running a daycare out of their house. Not a small one, 6 or 7 kids in addition to their own 3. 10 children total, running around their backyard, screaming from 7 in the morning until 6 at night. I know the hours because I could hear them through my office window. That's illegal in our zoning. You can't run a commercial daycare in a residential house without a license and without sound barriers. I didn't report them. It wasn't my business. I wore noise-canceling headphones. But then the packages started disappearing. I order a lot of things online. Work clothes, books, groceries. The delivery drivers would leave them on my porch. I have a camera doorbell. I started noticing that packages would be marked delivered, but when I got home, they weren't there. I checked the footage. The video showed the delivery person dropping the package. Then, 2 or 3 hours later, Tiffany would walk onto my porch, pick up the package, and walk back to her house. She didn't even look around to see if anyone was watching. She just took them. I lost about $200 worth of stuff that month. A coat, some shoes, a kitchen mixer. I called the police and filed a report. An officer came to my house. He talked to the Hendersons. They denied everything. They said I was harassing them. The officer told me to get a lockbox for my packages. He said without video of them actually opening the packages. It was my word against theirs. I showed him my doorbell footage. He said, "That shows her on your porch, but not opening the box. Could be she was checking on your house for you." I bought the lockbox. I installed it on my porch. The next week, they started parking in my driveway again. This time, they blocked my garage completely. I couldn't get my car out to go to work. I went over there at 6 in the morning. Brad answered the door in his underwear. I told him to move the car. He said he would, but he had to get his kids ready for school. He moved it at 8:30. I was 2 hours late for work. My employer was understanding, but I lost pay for those hours. That was when I realized something. This wasn't random. This wasn't them being inconsiderate. They were trying to make my life hard enough that I would move, or they just enjoyed the space they were taking from me. Either way, they weren't going to stop. They were going to keep taking inches until I had nothing left. I started documenting everything. I took photos of the poop on my driveway with timestamps. I recorded the noise levels from their backyard with a decibel app on my phone. I saved the video of Tiffany taking my packages. I kept a notebook, dates, times, what happened. I looked up the city zoning laws. I found out that operating an unlicensed daycare is a $500 fine per day. I found out that blocking someone's mailbox is a federal offense. I found out that taking mail that isn't yours is mail theft, which is a felony. I didn't do anything with this information yet. I just collected it. I wanted to be ready. I hoped I wouldn't need to use it. Then came the mailbox. It was a Tuesday in November. I had been expecting an important letter. My car registration renewal. The DMV said they sent it 2 weeks prior. I walked out to my mailbox at the end of my driveway. It's one of those standard black metal boxes on a wooden post. The kind every house has in this neighborhood. I put my key in the lock. It wouldn't turn. I pulled on the door. It wouldn't open. I looked closer. There was gray stuff around the edges of the door. It looked like caulk, but harder. I got a screwdriver from my garage and tried to pry the door open. It didn't budge. I looked at the Hendersons' mailbox. Theirs opened fine. I checked the neighbor on the other side. Theirs was fine too, just mine was sealed. I called the post office. They said they would send a maintenance worker. 3 days later, a postal worker came out. He looked at my mailbox and shook his head. He said, "Someone poured concrete in here, ma'am." "This is federal property vandalism. You need to call the Postal Inspection Service." He showed me. He had broken the lock to open it. Inside, the box was half filled with cement. It had hardened around the sides. My mail was inside, trapped in concrete. My registration renewal was ruined. There were also 3 bills that were now soaked through with gray water from the concrete curing. The postal inspector came the next day. He was a serious man in a blue shirt. He took photos. He asked if I had any enemies. I told him about the Hendersons. I showed him my notebook. He wrote everything down. He said tampering with a mailbox carries a federal prison sentence up to 3 years and a $250,000 fine. If we can prove who did this, it's serious. I asked if he could prove it. He said, "Do you have cameras facing the mailbox?" I didn't. My doorbell camera faced the porch, not the street. The mailbox was 20 feet away, out of range. I said I could check my footage from that night to see if anyone approached. I spent 4 hours reviewing video. At 2:15 a.m. on Monday night, Brad Henderson walked across his yard to my driveway. He was carrying a bucket. He looked around, then spent 5 minutes at my mailbox. Then he walked back. He was wearing a dark hoodie, but the streetlight caught his face. It was clearly him. I sent the video to the postal inspector. He called me back in an hour. He said, "We have enough for a warrant, but these cases take time. Months, maybe. In the meantime, we'll install a temporary mailbox for you. But ma'am, I have to tell you, federal charges are harsh. Are you sure you want to pursue this?" I thought about it. If I pressed charges, Brad could go to prison. Tiffany would lose their income. The kids would be put in foster care or sent to relatives. It was a nuclear option. I told the inspector I needed to think about it. He said to call him when I decided. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen and listened to the Hendersons' dogs barking. I thought about the driveway, the poop, the packages, the trash. I thought about how tired I was, how I just wanted to come home and have peace, how I had tried to be nice, reasonable, quiet, and how they had responded by pouring concrete into my mailbox. I looked at my notebook. 47 incidents in 6 months. 47 times I had been patient or understanding or just silent. And now I couldn't even get my mail because they wanted to make a point. I called the inspector back the next morning. I told him to proceed with the investigation, but I also told him I wanted to wait on pressing charges. I wanted to see something first. I had another idea, a slower idea, one that fit the rules they had taught me. They liked to take things inch by inch, so would I. I started with the daycare. I called the City of Phoenix Zoning and Planning Department. I spoke to a woman named Doris. I told her I thought my neighbors were running an unlicensed daycare. I gave her the address. I said I had observed 10 children on the property every weekday. I said I had video of the noise levels exceeding residential limits. I asked if this was something the city looked into. Doris said they take unlicensed childcare very seriously. She asked for my name. I gave her my real name. I wasn't hiding anymore. She said an investigator would come out within 2 weeks. 5 days later, a white city truck parked in front of the Hendersons' house. A man in khakis went to the door. He stayed for an hour. When he left, Tiffany came out and stood in her driveway and screamed at Brad. I could hear her through my closed window. She was yelling that they were going to lose the house, that the daycare was their only income, that he had ruined everything. I didn't smile. I just watched. I made a note in my book. City visit, 10/23, 10:15 a.m. 3 days after that, the notices started arriving. Not to me, to them. I saw Brad pulling certified mail slips out of their mailbox. He looked worried. The fines for operating without a license started at $500 per day, retroactive to when they started. They had been operating for 8 months. That's a lot of money. But I wasn't done. Remember the trash bins? I called the HOA. I spoke to the president, a man named Mr. Chen, who lived 3 streets over. I told him that the Hendersons had been blocking the sidewalk with their vehicles, using other residents' trash bins without permission, and violating noise ordinances. I said I had documentation. Mr. Chen was thrilled. He told me the Hendersons had been a problem for other neighbors too, but no one wanted to file formal complaints. He asked me to email him my photos and videos. I sent them that night. The HOA sent a warning letter first, then a fine, then a notice that they were in violation of the CCRs and could face a lien on their property if they didn't correct the issues. The lien would be $2,000 plus $100 per day until compliance. Brad came to my door that evening. He knocked hard. I answered through the screen door. He was holding the HOA letter. His face was red. He said, "Did you do this?" I said, "Do what?" He said, "The HOA. The city, someone is reporting us." I said, "You poured concrete in my mailbox, Brad. That's a federal crime. The postal inspector has video of you doing it." "You're looking at prison time." He went pale. He said, "That's bull." "You don't have video," I said. "Check your mail." "You'll get a summons soon, or maybe you won't, since you like to mess with mailboxes." He stood there. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He walked back to his house. 2 days later, a crew came to install a new mailbox for me. The postal inspector called. He said Brad Henderson had admitted to the mailbox vandalism when they served the search warrant. He said Brad claimed it was a prank. The inspector asked if I wanted to press charges now. I asked what would happen if I did. He said Brad would likely get probation and a hefty fine. Maybe 6 months in jail if the judge was strict. But the felony charge would stick. Brad would lose his job. He worked in insurance. They don't hire felons, I thought about it. I thought about Tiffany. I thought about their kids. I thought about the poop on my driveway and the stolen packages and the concrete. I said, I want to make a deal. The inspector was quiet. Then he said, I'm listening. I said, I'll drop the charges if he admits to everything in writing. The mailbox, the packages, the harassment, and he pays for my damages. And he moves his truck. And he stays off my property. The inspector said that wasn't really how federal law worked, but he said he could recommend leniency to the prosecutor if the victim, me, requested it. He said the prosecutor might go for a deferred prosecution agreement. Brad would pay restitution, serve community service, and stay clean for a year. If he messed up, the charges would come back. I said, tell him that's the offer, and tell him the HOA fines and city fines are separate. I can't stop those. But the federal charges can go away if he behaves. Brad took the deal. He paid me $800 for the stolen packages and the mailbox damage. He wrote a 3-page letter admitting to everything. He admitted to parking in my driveway to annoy me. He admitted to taking my packages because he thought I was stuck up for asking him to move his truck. He admitted to pouring the concrete because I had made him look bad by taking photos of his violations. I gave a copy of that letter to the HOA. I gave a copy to the city zoning board. I kept the original. The city shut down the daycare. The HOA put a lien on their house until they paid $4,500 in fines. Brad lost his side job because of the criminal complaint, even though the charges were deferred. His employer found out and fired him. Tiffany had to get a job at a grocery store. They had to sell one of their cars. I didn't celebrate. I just watched my driveway stay clear. I watched my trash bins stay empty. I checked my mailbox every day and found only my mail. The Hendersons moved out 6 months later. They sold the house to a nice young couple who keep their music low and their dog leashed. The new neighbors introduced themselves. They brought me cookies. I brought them a plant. The postal inspector called me last month. He said Brad's deferment period was over. He had kept clean. The charges were dismissed. I was glad. I didn't want him in prison. I just wanted him to stop. My mailbox is still there at the end of my driveway. It's a new one, bright and clean. I check it every morning on my way to work. I take out my mail, close the latch, and walk back up my driveway. No one parks there. No dogs poop there. It's just concrete and quiet. That's all I wanted. Not revenge, really. Just space. Just the inches of my own life. Back where they belonged. I earned them, I kept them. And I learned that when someone keeps taking from you, inch by inch, you don't have to give them the whole yard. You just have to show them where the line is, and make sure they see it clearly. That's what happened. That's all.